You become a PD in Chicago. That's a huge leap to go from being a jock to boom, Chicago at an ABC-owned station. Even more.
Yeah.
Take me through that. You
Sure.
walk through the door. You get hired. All that usual stuff.
Well, as I was working at WOR-fm, I shared with my wife. I'd come home and I'd say, "Geez, this is just not going in the right direction. I am really frustrated." She'd say, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, I'd like to fix it. I could program that station." And she said, "Well, how would you do that?" I said, "Well, I'd write a book." She said, "Well, why don't you write your book about what programming philosophy?" And so I began to do that. Every page was a thought about something I would do if, in fact, I became a program director. So I wrote this book about what I would do if I could become the program director. And one afternoon, I walked into the corporate headquarters for ABC, and without an appointment, I said to the receptionist, I want to talk to somebody about programming a radio station.
And they didn't throw you out.
They didn't throw me out. They didn't throw me out. They sent me up to see Bob Henneberry. And I said, "Bob, here's the deal." And I said, "I just feel like I'd like to move on into programming. And I have written a little thing here about what I think would be my programming philosophy. And I'd like to get an opinion. I'd just like to have somebody read it to say, yeah, this is good, this is garbage, whatever." And he said, "I'm kind of busy this week, but," he said, "I promise," he said, "leave the book. I will read it and I'll get back to you." Bob called me a week later and he said, "Jim," he said, "not only do I like your book," he said, "I think your philosophies are good. And we would like to talk to you about the potential of possibly programming an ABC radio station." Well, I was just knocked out by that, Pat. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, for sure.
Within a couple of days, Bob set up a meeting with Alan Shaw, who was the president of the FM division. They didn't have an opening at the time, but he said, we'll be back in touch. A few weeks went by and an opportunity came up for KSFX in San Francisco to be the program director. The Van Lines company packed up all of our stuff in New York City. On the way out, I got a call from Alan Shaw, who said, "Jim, change of plans. You're going to Chicago." Nice. He said, "We have an urgent need right now to go have someone take over the programming at WDAI." So it was a scary moment for me, Pat, because I thought to myself, and I said this to my wife on the way out in the car, I said, what if we get there and this station sounds so good and they're not happy with the way it is? She said, you'll be all right with that. ABC, Alan Shaw, they were terrific to me. I hooked up with maybe the greatest general manager any first-timer ever could have had, a fellow by the name of Roger Turnbow, who had the patience to teach me what I didn't know and the patience to tolerate what I thought I did know and didn't. And it was a great opportunity.
There's a pretty big transition going from being a jock to being a PD, especially in your instance, where you're all of a sudden you're doing it in another city. Same format, different format. I would assume you're going into sort of like an AOR type format, much like PLJ
Absolutely,
in New York.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was rockin' stereo.
What was that like?
It was really a learning curve for me, Pat. I found very quickly not to play my favorite songs. I remember, of course, my wife and I, we lived the lifestyle. We loved album rock music. And so I put a lot of cuts on the air that were, that I thought were terrific. And my first book came out and it was Asterisks, the big Zippo. And I learned very quickly that, I was going to have to play popular, familiar tracks. And fortunately, ABC was patient. And they taught me how to do that format. Hired some great talent. Dave Van Dyke was my afternoon drive guy. Gary Gears was the voice of Sears Tires and Batteries.
He had a big voice. He had a giant voice. Gary Gears. Yeah.
And I hired Jim Kerr to do mornings. I was the last stop before Jim went to New York City, and I hired him out of Ann Arbor, Michigan. It was I loved the AM radio station because obviously WLS was a monster. And the program director of the AM was a guy by the name of Mike McCormick. So Mike and I were friends, and I'd say, "Mike, any chance I could ever be on the AM station?" He said, "Well, why don't you do summer relief for us?" And he said, "Would you like to do the imaging for us?" And I put together all the top of the hours, The Rock of Chicago and John Landecker, 89 WLS.
Yeah. That's
And
cool stuff on your resume. Yeah.
yeah, Mike McCormick said, I want you to say, when you say the call letters, I want you to say the call letters like you're saying, W, hell yes. He said, that's the way I want it said, W, hell yes. Yeah, so it was, the station just covered coast to coast. I mean, it was just amazing. I did some overnight shows, of course, because I was doing summer relief. And it was great. You'd get somebody on a naval destroyer out in San Diego Harbor, and then you'd talk to a fellow over Iceland in an Air Force airplane. And it was great fun.